You good? Okay. Yeah, so my name is Matt McCarley. I work in the web office here. I've got about 18 months, a little more than 18 months of web programming experience. So basically that my setting the expectations a little bit for this, I'm not an expert in Angular 2 in any way. And my general philosophy for learning things is basically learn as much as you need to get something that works and then deepen your understanding as you continue using it. So my hope is that it might pique your interest in learning Angular 2 for yourself. Maybe you have an idea that you would like to turn into a working web application that then this will lead you to try that out. So my original idea was I remembered with Spotify from using it a couple of years ago, their software used to have their desktop software used to have like an app store in the software. So I don't know if anyone remembers that, but essentially you could go in and there were already some pre-built applications like I think one of them was called like Mood Lister, and basically to extend Spotify's capabilities. And I was curious how they did that, and so I looked up on developer.spotify.com, started exploring that, and they have a web API console that explains like how to use their API and what capabilities it has. And there's quite a bit on there. And so basically, they have the API console on that website. So anything that you're curious of, like, I wonder actually what data this will return if I make this request, it'll preview that data. And so you can kind of start to play around with that and see what sort of things are available to play with. So I did that for a while, and I had been wanting to learn Angular and actually use it for a project, something that was useful. And so I decided to combine the two things. So one of the things that I found in there, that every song in Spotify has really detailed song characteristics for each song. So you'll see in a little bit on the app using those, but I mean, essentially every song has, I think it's in between like 10 and 12 different characteristics about how acoustic it is, if it's live, if it's instrumental, and they're all on like a range or a range between 0 and 1. The only one that's not is the loudness, which is actually the decibel value, or probably an average decibel value of the song. And so I wanted to be able to make more customized playlists, like be able to say, I want music that's similar to this artist, but I don't want, the loud music that's similar, or I want all the acoustic music that's similar. So basically this app is going to allow me to do more than you can do with just Spotify's app. I kind of mentioned all that. And then my other idea is to basically make the exact same app, or an app with very similar functionality, using other front-end application frameworks as a way to test like which framework I like better. Because I think having that direct experience, like right in the beginning, remembering what it was like to build the app with Angular, then I can compare that experience with React or Ember or Backbone. Angular has a tool, Angular CLI, so you can use the command line to do the initial setup. When I first did it, I actually had to go to like their GitHub starter pack, essentially, and then download this starter code and then start working from there. But this command line tool allows you to basically initialize a project really quickly, and you can actually start writing usable code within minutes, which saves a lot of time. Okay, so
basically just going to walk you through the app a little bit. Currently, I have it hosted on my the only domain that I own, which is mattmccarley.com. So you can go to it if you want on your own device. The very first thing that it brings you to is a login screen. To use the functionality, you actually need to be a user on Spotify. So if you haven't created or you don't have a user account, it won't really work. My idea at this point is anyone who would want to use this is someone who uses Spotify already, because it's basically extending Spotify's capabilities. So you hit login. I guess I'm already logged in, but here, I'll log out. So if you're not logged in, it just takes you to a normal sort of login gateway. Okay, so, and again, the user interface isn't the best. It's not as good as I want it to be, but it's, it works, and it's good for testing at this point. But so it just walks you through, create a name. So I could call this, whatever, I'll just call it an artist that I like, Ryan Adams. And so it requires to get detailed recommendations. You can basically put in a seed artist, a seed track, or a seed genre, or any combination of those with up to 5 total seeds. The way it's currently built, I only have it built for artist and genre. I have some plans on changing that, but so I'm going to use Ryan Adams as the seed artist, and I'm actually not going to choose a genre. A genre is not required. The only thing currently required is this seed artist. So any one of these is optional, including number of tracks. The default number of tracks on Spotify's API is 20. I'll make a playlist that has 40 tracks. And I want, so you'll see each one kind of explains what it is. So I want to be fairly confident that the track is acoustic. I want to be able to dance to it. I want it to be high energy. Don't really want it to be an instrumental track. I know a lot of Ryan Adams music, so I want it to be likely to be music that I haven't heard, so I bring the popularity down. I don't really care about if it's live or not. I don't care about the loudness. Don't care about that. Valence is how happy or sad it's likely to be, or positive or negative. I want it to be positive. And you can even choose if it's if you know anything about music, if it's in a major or minor mode, or target what key it's in. So I want to target songs that are in C# minor. And if I hit this, it should work. I don't have a loading screen or anything. I should, but okay. So then it takes me to the playlist that I created. Currently, it creates a private playlist on my Spotify account. It's not public. That's something that I'd like to make configurable, so you can make it a public playlist that could be searchable. But then it automatically opens in the Spotify web player. But if you have Spotify software installed on your computer, it usually will open in that. So if you're on your mobile device and you have Spotify installed, then it gives you the option to open it in the app, and then you can just start playing it on there. But it should work. The only field that's required, and I currently don't even give you any feedback to know that, which isn't good, is the seed artist. The other problem is that if seed artist is spelled wrong, it will error out and won't finish. So the end goal is to actually have basically have where you name the playlist, and then you have
if you can imagine an interface where you can like click to add seed, for instance, and then you choose if you want to use an artist seed, a track seed, or a genre seed. And then once you select what type, then it's like a searchable list so that people don't have to remember how to spell an artist, or if they spell it wrong, it won't work.
Okay, yeah, so that works. Any questions at this point before we dive into the code? Yeah.
Potentially. So on those ones, like the danceability, instrumentalist, what are you using for the kind of unit of measure there? Like, how do you?
So Spotify, none of the actual data, I'm not doing anything with it other than using Spotify's existing data. So every track on Spotify has a JSON object that has all these measures stored.
Okay. Can you show us the Spotify API documentation?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. So this is the developer section. This console is what I was talking about originally. So you'll see when I walk you through the code which things I'm using. The main thing that kind of piqued my interest and got the idea of if something like this would be possible was this little thing, get recommendations based on seeds. So currently I'm using targets also. I don't know if so you see that some of them have target mode, but they also have a min and max. So you could build it totally different. Instead of saying, I want to target an acousticness of 0.75 on a scale from 0 to 1, you could say, I want songs that have a minimum acousticness of 0.5 and a max of 0.8. So you could build a different sort of range slider to do that, or you could just in the background, if someone put 0.7, you could like do a plus or minus 0.1 or something to make that range. Yeah, so on this, like what I was talking about before, how anybody can really try it, you can hit fill sample data, and then this request is what actually gets sent to their API server, whatever it's called, and it'll show you what it sends back. Access token expired. So I don't need to. These things are the scopes of authentication. I don't think you need any on this. Okay, so this should say, I think that's Spain's music market. You can also choose what market it is. Mine defaults to US, but you could eventually like have it choose your market based on your geolocation if you wanted. So this is seeding a track. All the tracks and artists actually have these unique identifiers. So when it's sent to Spotify's API, it's not like it's actually asking for Ryan Adams. I have to do a Spotify search for Ryan Adams, get the ID, and then plug that into this request. But anyway, this should return a JSON object. Please. Okay. So the actual tracks. What is it? I think the list of recommended tracks starts right here. There should be 10 of them.
What's the rest of the impact? It's just metadata about the request, or?
I'm not exactly sure. I haven't really used any of this above data, I don't think. Well, maybe each one is actually here. I know it like if it gives you the album data, the artist data, and then for the album data, like it has the image, thumbnails and stuff. Yeah. So originally, before I used that thing where it just jumps straight to Spotify, I started building out a UI on my end where I looped through this data and displayed like the album and the track and whatever, but
basically I could get to I could more quickly get to something that someone would actually use just using Spotify's, because essentially what I was doing was just rebuilding Spotify's UI anyway. Long term, I would like to do something, because I've had some of the people that I've shown it to are like, what if there's, because what I do now is I create the playlist, then I go get these tracks, and then I add those tracks to the playlist. But what a lot of people wanted was, get the tracks, let me review the tracks, choose which ones I don't want, for instance, or sort them, somehow interact with them, and then choose to finalize it and add it to a playlist.
So that's something I might do later on. Yeah, so I mean, if any one of you went to this, you can start playing around with it and get a feel for what sort of data Spotify gives you access to that you could play around with. Was that enough of that, Dan, do you think, for you? Okay, where am I at? Yeah, any questions at this point? I don't know.
Did you walk through any of the stuff at all?
No, I haven't gone through the code yet. I was just kind of demoing the app. Any questions about the app or anything at this point? Yeah, so
I have a whole bunch of dummy ones, but I think I'm like.
yeah, because every time you hit create playlist, I think it's the second thing that happens is it creates a playlist with that playlist name. So even if it errors out on your artist seed because you typed it in wrong or whatever, you're getting empty playlists on your Spotify account. Yeah, so
it's obviously not the best practice, but
Can you delete them?
yeah, you can delete anything that you.
Well, I mean, okay, so that open.spotify or whatever it does, if you don't have a premium account, it's like their way of like selling you a premium. It's like a gateway to like, they usually have some sort of like marketing thing on the bottom is what I saw, like when I wasn't logged in or I was on somebody else's, I don't remember. But if you have a premium account, it just opens it in their web player. If that makes sense. Again, long term, I would like to have more interaction on my app before you actually go to Spotify. But again, it's the easiest to start. Okay, describe some of that. Oh, the other thing that I think would be really cool is currently, like when you do an artist seed, it basically just, I mean, it gives you a lot of similar artists to the artists that you plugged in. But I played around with it, and there was a way that I could get like a specific artist. So Ryan Adams, I could get a list of all his tracks, and all those tracks have that same song characteristic data. So then I could put those tracks into like a sortable table, but instead of sorting just by duration or track name or album, you could sort by these song characteristics. So if you wanted to see like Ryan Adams, make me a list from most acoustic to least acoustic, or quietest to loudest, or whatever, just a way that you could interact with the music with more rich data, I think would be interesting. And then another thing that wouldn't be that difficult to do was their API can give you like your listener history, and they have like, I think 2 or 3 different versions, but one of the versions is like the most recent listener history. So it has like a time gap or whatever, where it's just going to show you the stuff from the last month. So if your music taste has changed recently or whatever, and you can do like a longer view or whatever. And so I could basically get your most recent tracks or whatever, and get that song characteristic data, and then present it in some sort of graphical way, so you could see like basically your music taste, but in these song characteristic formats, if that makes sense. Like I actually prefer, most of the music I listen to is really acoustic, quiet, or whatever, high energy, something like that.
Could you compare like previous, like they have Discover Weekly, which I don't know if it does this automatically, but could you compare like, okay, here's what they're listening to, a button that says I want more of the same, or I want something new, or you know what I mean?
That you could somehow influence their built-in algorithms?
Well, I don't know if it has to be Discover Weekly, but your own playlist.
Yeah, you could definitely, so that one of the first things I thought of before I even thought of the more customized thing was just to say like, get my listener history and then just like hit a button that used that to create a new playlist with, so it's more like using my preferences that you can find out from my history, create a playlist similar to the artist. But I really wanted a more, does that make sense?
Yeah, but that's also another, like if this listener profile, then you could basically use that as like to pre-plug in for any additional playlist. Okay, yeah, so now I guess the Angular stuff and the code. Okay. So I guess
Who here is familiar with Angular at all? Okay. Like like on a scale of 1 to 10, how familiar would you say you are?
Maybe like a 7 for Angular 1.
Okay. So I think we should probably trade if you want to know.
I don't know about that.
7, 8.
7, 8.
1.
Okay. I didn't see. Were there any other hands? How familiar on a scale of 1 to 10 are you with Angular? Any version, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
and the rest of you are zero experience. Okay. -4. Okay. Well, I have little to no experience with Angular 1, so I'm not even quite aware of how different Angular 2 is from Angular 1. So some of you that are really familiar with Angular 1.
A lot in some ways, not so much in
Okay. So
especially if you're at like 1.5 or 1.6, then it's much.
so it started to approach. Okay. So as I said before, I use Angular CLI to initiate the project, and that basically throws in a bunch of starter code for you. Like before you've created any components or really written any code, it gets you started with a module, like your main app module. So the best way for me to explain this would be to start here. Well, probably here, actually. So the main thing that happens if someone goes to mattmccarley.com is it serves up this index file, and the part that actually directs it to Angular is this app root. Okay, that's my understanding. And the app root, what's that? Oh. Okay, sorry about that. You should have sat up front, but that's okay. What's that? Is that better? Okay, well, now I can't work with it at all. Main.ts, okay. Well, I don't know what that stuff does, so for me, it starts at app module. I guess, I mean, the part that I did, I'll just start with that. I mean, basically, the stuff that makes that work after I did Angular init or whatever for this project was I built out a main component. And the only thing that's in my main component is this page title. And each of the components have these component decorators where you get to define some of these variables. I don't think mine, yeah, so that nav bar that you saw is here in just regular HTML. And then the thing that makes it a web app where the view is changing, this thing down here, between, just the plain welcome screen, between that and this is that this router outlet. Okay, if that's making sense so far. So that is actually what's changing the view. again, and I mean, I slotted about a half hour to explain this. This took me, more than a month and basically going through 2 online courses to get this far. So if I can't really like chunk it down to something really good for you, I apologize. But hopefully, again, my goal is basically to show you that this is something that you could do, hopefully, and that inspire you that if you have an idea for a web app with Angular 2 and Angular CLI, it's not actually that hard, even if you don't understand all the ins and outs. So, yeah, I didn't pay for anything. I mean, yeah. So this router outlet is what actually changes that view in that section. My routes are defined here. So if someone types in welcome, it shows the welcome component, which I'll show you the components in a second. If, like in this part, if you see, whatever, mattmccarley.com welcome shows the welcome component in that router outlet. The create playlist shows that view in the router outlet. If there's no path, it redirects to the welcome, so that the welcome view is the initial view. Yes, let's see what else. Okay, so starting with the main module, I'll show you the welcome component. So every component has a TypeScript file, an HTML file, and a CSS file. The TypeScript file, basically everything, like all the, I don't know if it would be called the data, but basically all the elements of the actual class, that component, are inside this export section. Okay, so let's see. So the other thing that was actually really confusing for me to learn was using the services for Angular. Like I mean, initially when I was first learning it, like I was trying to write a lot of the actual HTTP interactions in just the component, the logic for that in this section, and basically found out as I was learning that that wasn't correct. So anything, basically so I had to log into Spotify, to authenticate my app with Spotify, I had to create this login service, which is right here. So essentially, this client ID you get in that developer section when you create an app, you register your app, and it gives you a client ID. This redirect URI is something you have to send with the HTTP request, and it has to match what you registered for your app. So when you create your app on Spotify, you have to say what the redirect URI is that you're going to be sending to it. Let's see. Remember on that web API where it brought up that menu where you click the different scopes? Basically, I'm creating a string that includes all the scopes so that basically I will never reach a wall where I'm not getting the authentication that I need to get the data that I want. So basically this generate random string for my state is up here. Here's the URL that I build that I actually send. And this is what I'm using this window location, href, is what I'm using to actually try to authorize the app. Okay. And this actually doesn't return anything or anything. Basically, when I click that login button, it runs this and changes the URL to whatever the redirect URI was, if that makes sense. It's going to send me back to this create playlist, but it's also going to include this access token. which is what allows me to, when I click create playlist, actually be able to create it, if that makes sense. Okay, where was I? Oh, welcome component. Okay, so basically that's all this thing really does. Info service, I never use that. Okay. And then the only other component that I have is this create playlist component. And so the other part of Angular is I created like these, where are they? These interfaces for the different types of data that I was using. So you'll see those referenced. So there's playlist and user and playlist form. Okay, so this class, this component has a page title, it has a playlist form where I'm starting out with these things as undefined, and then it has all these. This is for some other logic later. And if you can think about it, basically these names or these variables are just something that I'm starting out with, and then later on some data gets added into it, or I'm initiating it or initializing it with data already. Here I'm using 3 different services. The very first service I'm using is getting the access token from that URL. And then, so basically I'm calling that service, I'm calling the get user info function on the service. Which is this. And basically that just gets my user ID. I'm seeing a lot of blank faces. It's making me really nervous. So, so I never, when I was in school, I was probably the person just like, even though I was understanding. Okay, so very first thing I do is get my user info, and then I'm plugging that response that it's giving me into this variable right here, user info, which is up here. And then there's this create playlist, and that's basically what happens when someone hits that create playlist button. So the very first thing it does, like I said, is it creates that playlist. The reason I had to get the user ID is because I needed to know what user to make the playlist on. So creates the playlist, it takes that response. So when you create a playlist on the API, it sends back data about that playlist. It takes that response, and I store it in playlist info. Okay? And then immediately after that, when that's done, so you see this format in subscribe where I take the response and I do something with it. I handle an error if there was one, and then this is what happens when that's done. So I've kind of chained all these functions together. So after it creates a playlist, it gets the artist ID from that search field. So and the logic isn't fail-safe like you saw. If you type in the thing wrong, essentially what's happening is it took that thing that you plugged into that search bar, and when it went to search to get the user ID, what's happening is right here, it's erroring out, and that just stops because I built it like that. Not very good. But so if it works, if you get the artist ID, you typed it in right, then it goes and it gets your recommended tracks. So it gets the artist ID, it gets the playlist, and this get recommended tracks is on the playlist service. So what this does is it basically builds that HTTP request from all that data that was in that form. So when you're changing those sliders, it's actually changing data on each of those variables. So it's using all that. On each one of these, you see this check. So basically, if you don't do anything, or if you toggle those little switches for each of the song characteristics, it resets it to undefined. So if it's undefined, it doesn't add that request to the URL string or the HTTP request. So it goes through all those things. It creates a string, and then it makes the HTTP request right here. And then if it gets a response, it basically takes it and sends it back here on the other end. So then it's got that response, didn't error out, and so then it adds the tracks to the playlist. And then it gets the information about that playlist, and then that's it. So then the other thing is basically going to the URL for that final playlist when you click on the Go to Spotify playlist button. Or no, it just calls that after when everything else is done, because you never have to click a button to do that. This is what toggles those switches. Yeah, so I mean, I really feel like I didn't explain that well, but I don't know if you have questions, I can answer what you want or what you have. Try to. Questions? Yeah?
So this might be a dumb question, but is the TypeScript get compiled to vanilla JavaScript, or is there something running on the server?
So what actually gets distributed, I use Angular CLI to do this. So you do,
Okay, so the CLI.
yeah. I know there's like,
It's configurable. So you can
Yeah.
tell it to go down, file down to ES5, or ES 2016, and various different things, and then file that to whatever browser you can set that.
and they're like, if you're just serving it like localhost or whatever before you've actually put it out for production, I mean, I think even that was configurable as far as like you could put in an option for like ahead of time compilation, or if you wanted it to do it on the fly, I don't know. But when you do the, can't remember the command, but basically when you deploy it for production, it ends up being not very many files. I mean, it's basically all of that becomes these 7 files when it's done. That's what's actually on the server.
And the other CLI is using Webpack for the web processing behind the scenes. They don't expose the Webpack configuration file directly. They really kind of hide a lot of that stuff, but it does make it really easy to get started and make it simple. And it's got all the NPM scripts in there for doing the development build and production build.
Do you put your own Webpack configuration on top of it, or not really?
Not really. We need to go outside and just use the normal Webpack build process.
Yeah, and I found that I was confused enough about trying to do it without the CLI that it was worth it to use the CLI at first until I got to a place where, I mean, there's no, at least in my mind, you know, if you're not even really understanding the configuration, why would you really need to use it? You know, just
you're just wanting to learn technology, CLI. There you go.
Yeah, and then hopefully, you know, as I work with it more, I'll get to a point where I wouldn't use the CLI, or if I need to not use it, I would be comfortable doing that.
The CLI will build a test file for it. So, at the same time, whenever you create a component, it creates corresponding test file.
Yeah, so the CLI didn't show much, but basically,
It creates the test based on all the stuff you define in the component. Or?
Yeah, just the test shell. So it's not there's no
Oh, you
logic
still
of
have
what the
to
component is,
configure
but
it.
yeah, but it'll do an end-to-end test. And you can see in its project, yeah,
yes.
an end-to-end test folder and
Feel like just have to test the class.
It's just the structure for the component for the class. And then they'll also, I think they also have a connection to like a JS, web-based script to see if it actually fills things out and go through whether that can be in the end test. It's mainly unit tests, and but it's just a shell stuff. You have to put in the actual test method.
Yeah, I mean, these are the commands for the CLI that, like, if you create a new component, it's just a matter of putting that in and naming the component, and then all like the wiring up that you have to do initially to connect it to the module and all that. Even the folder creation and the file creation it does for you. So the 2 courses that I went through online didn't use the CLI, so I did do that initial setup or wiring it up on my own first. But I mean, I found it much quicker to use the CLI personally. 2 Pluralsight courses, which are paid, but most of the stuff, I mean, the documentation is pretty good. I found it to be fairly confusing without some other resources. I think it was... This one was really quite good, and then this one also. This lady, I don't know if anyone knows who Deborah Kurata is or something. I mean, she seems to have been around in computer science and web development a long time, but she has her voice. It sounds like Siri. I mean, she talks like a computer. And I honestly had to Google it because I thought maybe she's mute and she uses like a voice generator or something because it's so yeah, why am I not playing? I don't know if you...
Hello, my name is Deborah Kurata, and I'd like to welcome you to my course, Angular 2 Getting Started from Pluralsight. This beginner-level course takes you on a journey through the
That's hard to believe that's not computer generated. Yeah, even the way she goes. What was the thing she just said?
Deborah Kurata, and I'd like to welcome you to my course, Angular 2 Getting...
Angular 2, like the way the modulation of that, it's like a computer changing tones, I don't know, but...
You can also look at
yeah, that was one that came up. I mean, my general recommendation from this, again, is just, I find it so much easier to learn if you have something that you're going to actually use. Like, even though this thing is not really, I mean, it has a lot of room for improvement. I mean, I'm at home on my phone going to mattmccarley.com, making a playlist before I listen to it while I cook dinner or something. Like, it's something that I'm actually using. I just create it for my own personal use. If other people eventually enjoy it, well, that's fine. But I think that's a much better learning experience than, building a to-do app or whatever the normal thing is that you're supposed to do, which, I mean, you already have better to-do apps, so you're not motivated to make one. You know what I mean? But this app, actually, I couldn't find anything that did what I was doing, so it was motivating. So you said this one has some good ones on Angular too, egghead.io.
I think it's nice if you like really short videos.
Okay.
5 minutes videos, clips, things like that.
And if you're on if you're on like the learning curve and not currently employed in the profession or just doing this for enjoyment or whatever to get in, like the 2 that I used the most before I got a job was Team Treehouse and Code School, actually. When I was learning, I never paid more than $40 a month to start learning. I mean, some of them are subscription-based services where, a lot of it's on you to spend the time, but pretty good content, really. So, any other questions? I think that's all I had. Yeah, Nick? Oh, Taylor? Okay. Uh-huh.
Like what would be building apps like this?
My understanding is it's a web application framework. So if you're building a single page app for the web, it's one of the available frameworks to do that. I don't know if there's a better way to explain it, but
Like, 10 years ago, most of the code was written on the back end. Yeah. Now, we have offloaded up to the client, and that's where I think it comes into play. You can get a much more responsive application from the user point of view, and do all the logic up in the client that it can be done. Yeah. And then it just kind of shuffles data back and forth from servers or other clients or other websites, and does all that on the client. Then, of course, you still got to have the back end code, because you got to verify that what they're sending from the client is the data they're allowed to do.
To put it in perspective, like Facebook has an equivalent of React, and their entire Instagram or Reddit. Okay, so you can build really.
that's pretty complicated.
I mean, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So I just wanted to, are there any announcements? I know